This will include the largest ever rollout of live facial recognition technologies across England and Wales. We know this approach works.
If you missed your favorite show or interview, visit episodes on our website at theworldtoday.news. Our live shows are also on X, Facebook, YouTube, Rumble, Kick, and Twitch. Now there really is no reason to miss out on anything on theworldtoday.news.
For The World Today, this is James O'Neill. The European Council has approved a ban on Russian gas imports, though extensive exemptions mean supplies could continue for years. The phased plan begins with banning Russian LNG in January 2027, followed by pipeline gas in autumn of 2027, with landlocked states allowed purchases until 2028. Emergency safeguards permit exceptions if supply is threatened. Hungary and Slovakia opposed the measure, while Bulgaria abstained. Russian gas still accounts for about 13% of EU imports. The ban includes heavy penalties for violations and is intended to be permanent, preventing future reintegration of Russian energy even after the Ukraine war ends. The European Union has agreed to expanded legal migration from India as part of its largest ever free trade agreement with New Delhi. EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen announced a mobility scheme covering students, researchers, and skilled workers, along with a new legal gateway office in India. Indian nationals already rank second for EU residence permits. The deal comes despite high youth unemployment in Europe. Alongside migration measures, the trade agreement will cut tariffs on most goods, saving EU businesses billions annually and boosting exports, though critics warn it may encourage offshoring to lower-wage India. Rwanda has launched arbitration proceedings against the United Kingdom, accusing it of breaching financial and resettlement commitments under the now-scrapped Migration and Economic Development Partnership. Kigali said it filed a notice with the Permanent Court of Arbitration in November, alleging Britain failed to honor agreed payments and refused to resettle vulnerable refugees from Rwanda. The asylum deal, announced in 2022 under Prime Minister Boris Johnson, aimed to send illegal arrivals to Rwanda for processing. Prime Minister Keir Starmer ended the scheme in July 2024, calling it ineffective. Rwanda said London sought to forego two £50 million payments and terminated the deal without proper notice, despite contractual provisions. Elon Musk and Polish Foreign Minister Radoslaw Sikorski exchanged insults on X after Sikorski accused Musk of profiting from war crimes and failing to prevent Russian forces from using Starlink in Ukraine. Sikorski cited a report claiming Russian drones are being equipped with Starlink systems to improve range and accuracy. Musk responded by calling Sikorski a drooling imbecile, saying Starlink underpins Ukraine's military communications. The dispute follows earlier clashes between the two, including Musk's calls to dissolve the EU and his criticism of EU regulations after X was fined under the Digital Services Act. Sikorski previously told Musk to go to Mars. U.S. authorities have released two Russian sailors detained after the seizure of the Russian-flagged oil tanker Marinera, accused of violating U.S. sanctions on Venezuelan oil, according to Russia's foreign ministry. The vessel was intercepted in the North Atlantic on January 7th after being tracked from the Caribbean. Moscow condemned the seizure as illegal and demanded the sailors' release. Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova confirmed the two Russians are returning home. The tanker carried a multinational crew. The U.S. has seized several tankers enforcing sanctions on Venezuela, though it's now preparing to ease restrictions through a broader licensing regime. The BBC has apologized after failing to specify that Jews were the victims when covering International Holocaust Remembrance Day. Several BBC presenters referred to 6 million people murdered by the Nazis without noting they were targeted for being Jewish. Jewish leaders and groups condemned the omission as hurtful and a form of Holocaust distortion. Former envoy Lord Pickles and Holocaust Educational Trust CEO Karen Pollack criticized the broadcaster for diluting the Holocaust Jewish specificity.
Today marks Holocaust Memorial Day, a day for remembering the 6 million people who were murdered by the Nazi regime over 80 years ago.
This has been James O'Neill for The World Today.
Father wears his Sunday best. Mother's tired, she needs a rest. The kids are playing up downstairs. Sister's sighing in her sleep. Brother's got a date to keep, he can't hang around.
And then for the defense,
our house it has a crowd. There's always something happening, and it's usually quite loud.
How long do you think we're gonna stay here for?
Our house in the middle of our street. Our house in the middle of our...
The climate right now is no warmer than it's been many times throughout history. Our baseline is now the lowest that carbon dioxide has been in 600 million years. As far as temperature change, the IPCC's first report of 1992 showed that the medieval warm period was warmer than the present. Well, this didn't fit the narrative, so by the time the 1996 report came out, it was a completely contrived graph called the hockey stick. So what they did was they got rid of the medieval warm period and the Little Ice Age, and so instead of the graph doing this, they flattened it out, and then they added instrumental record on the end that looks like it's going way up. The point is that the people that are calling them out on it are not getting the media coverage. Because look, at this point there's billions of dollars going into the whole climate change narrative.
A hoax about carbon dioxide in the climate has caused a global energy and economic disaster. This is today's News Talk, The World Today.
And welcome back to The World Today. I'm Mike Ryan. Nice to have your company. We're going to talk about what happens when Russia wins the Ukraine war, and they're winning now. There's no reason to see otherwise. Not a whole lot of opposition, except a foolish NATO and most likely a foolish Ukraine. Now, we are pleased today to welcome back Richard Sakwa, Emeritus Professor of Politics from the University of Kent at Canterbury in the UK. Richard is a respected expert, having written widely on comparative politics, international relations, and political philosophy, with a focus on Russian and European affairs. His latest books are many, including The Putin Paradox, Bloomsbury in 2020, Deception, Russiagate and the New Cold War, Lexington Books 2022, and The Russia Scare, Fake News and Genuine Threat from Routledge 2022, The Lost Peace, How the West Failed to Prevent a Second Cold War, Yale University, and The Culture of the Second Cold War, Anthem Press 2025. His book, The Russo-Ukrainian War, Follies of Empire, is forthcoming in 2026. Now, we're going to be talking to Richard today about the Russian-Ukraine war, a war that the West has been stoking and supporting for years, to the utter destruction of the Ukrainians and their own economies. There's no doubt Russia is winning the war on many fronts. The West, or the Europeans, just need to face the facts. We're going to ask Richard what he sees the short-term future holds, and what will a Russian-conquered Ukraine look like, and what of the coalition of the willing? What will they be forced to do? Plenty of questions to ask. First of all, Richard, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
First of all, tell me about the war. How long do we? It's like asking how long is a piece of string, but how long do we have before it's finished?
Well, as you say, it's impossible to forecast, because clearly the front line has been moving, but it's been moving very slowly. In Donetsk, which about 15% of Donetsk Oblast, the region, is still defended by the Ukrainians, but Russia's moving forwards in Zaporozhye region, a larger enclave in Sumy, and so on. I think the decisive factor is going to be whether the Ukrainian can maintain its resilience and support for the next few months, because we know there's a massive shortage of manpower, enormous defections or people going AWOL, and of course recently announced that several million men who would be of conscription age have left or avoiding conscription. So, and just one other factor is, of course, is the the way that drone warfare has given the advantage to the defender, and it really has meant it's like the First World War with the trench warfare in with a 21st century twist, which means that the skies are permanently monitored, and at the slightest movement, slightest accumulation of forces is immediately attacked, and the ranges are getting longer and longer, 30 miles now minimum.
Do we see? Are we going to see more aggressive attacks on cities in Ukraine?
Well, on the energy network, yes. I mean, it's been Ukraine has been lucky for the last 2 or 3 years because the winters have been quite mild. This year, there's a polar uh, high pressure system, which in Russia and, of course, in Northern Europe, by the way, Scandinavia and the United States at the moment, and it's bitterly cold. Yes, this Russia has offered an energy, as it were, armistice a few times, and spectacularly in August 2024, and it was brokered by Qatar. And instead of accepting that, Zelensky personally, with a logistic support from the British, attacked Kursk, which is a region of Russia. And since then, there has been no energy armistice, and in fact, it's now being intensifying. It's a terribly cruel and awful thing, especially in winter, in which already we know at least 600,000 people from the city of Kiev have had to leave because it's becoming almost unlivable.
What are some of the milestones from a Russian's point of view in their domination of the territory?
Well, it's at the moment it's not just about territory. When there's much talk of the Trumpian peace talks and so on. Yes, as a minimum, and these were outlined in June 2024, Russia's war aims, and they haven't changed. They're a bit tougher, well, much tougher than what was on the table in Istanbul. This was the talks between Russia and Ukraine just weeks after the beginning of the war in February 2022. And in June 2024, Putin outlined three major elements, which is, of course, a neutral and non-militarized Ukraine, which could be no longer a threat, the internal transformation of the state to make it, as far from the Russian perspective, a tolerant, multicultural, multi-confessional, multilingual state, rather than this rather harsh, ethnocratic, well, monolinguistic and monocultural society which has emerged. And the third thing is territory. The minimum is Donetsk and Lugansk. This is the heartlands of the Donbass. So the milestones, well, I mean, it's, of course, there's talks continuing. Steve Witkoff, Jared Kushner, and the Russian side have changed their team. So talks, they're due to meet again in the next few days. So that's the immediate milestone.
At what point does Ukraine say enough, raises the white flag?
Yeah, that's that's a great question, because you would have thought that, well, this comes back to a question of what do we mean by winning and what do we mean by losing. In my view, that any sustainable peace or victory, if you want to use that language, has to encompass a situation in which the post-war Ukraine and post-war Russia, as well as post-war Europe, can live comfortably. It's no good if any of those three elements, and of course, the fourth element is the US-Russian relationship, which is bumpy, but at least there's elements of rapprochement, which I think is much to be welcomed. But it's no good if any one of those elements, Russia, Ukraine, and Europe, are dissatisfied. All they will do is stoke a renewal of war in 1 year, 5 years, 10 years. This is why the Korean option of an armistice, and of course, technically, North and South Korea are still at war. Technically, by the way, Japan and Russia haven't actually had a peace treaty because of the Kuril Islands. I don't think we want to see that in Europe. So there has to be a comprehensive package, and this can continue side by side with a continuation of hostilities, whereas the European Union and its individual members have got this extraordinary idea that you don't talk in the middle of a war. They were talking in the Vietnam War from 1968 onwards, certainly from 1972, and it ended in 1975. So it's an utterly bizarre European position. The Ukrainians, of course, now engaging in talks finally. When will they throw in a top? When will they accept? I'd put it differently. When will they accept the realities that Russia is a nuclear power? It's obviously far bigger, far more powerful. Its economy has survived unprecedented sanctions. Yes, it has damaged it in certain ways. Yet Russia is still a type of neo-Soviet economy with vast industrial plants. Now, Russia, as in all its wars, it gears up very slowly, but it's now geared up for a long haul. And also, the Ukrainians were always banking that there would be regime change in Moscow, that there would be popular opposition to the war. Now, my views and talking a lot about this is that very few Russians are enthusiastic about the war, but it's perceived as a grim necessity that how on earth could they accept a Ukraine which has Tomahawk missiles, which is armed to the teeth, the 20-point peace plan brokered between the United States and Kiev was about an 800,000 strong Ukrainian army, which is just absurd when this was reinforced by the so-called coalition of the willing, putting in NATO forces in Ukraine, which is what this war is about. So, just to say that the final immediate element, of course, is that Trump is saying he will not sign the security guarantees, which have now been accepted, until Ukraine gives up basically that 15% of Donetsk. So that's one of the immediate issues. And that's, they're now saying there's a peace deal 95% finished. Well, that 5% is a fundamental sticking point.
When they raise the white flag, and I think white flag's a bit simplistic, but when they do that, how do you think Europe will react? We have fearsome leaders in Macron, von der Leyen, a whole bunch of them. And I'm saying that with tongue in cheek. But what will Europe do? How will they react? They quite keen to send a peace force into Ukraine, and Putin definitely does not want that. So how will they react?
Just to say that peace force, it's a lot of big talk, but the peace force, they say, it needs a backstop, a US backstop, which at the moment we're seeing, which of course is no peace force at all, ultimately. And they'd be very hard pressed even to muster the sufficient men and arms. So the Russians, of course, it's absolutely a no-no. It's not on. So, but there is a little bit of movement. Yesterday, the European Union was talking about a new package of sanctions. Which was quite extraordinary, including finally cutting off energy exports or imports from Russia. But there are signs that they now understand they need to talk. Giorgia Meloni, the Italian leader, said it. Even Macron, who has now said that they need to engage with Moscow. Because one of the most sad elements at the moment is that this war is on our European continent, and yet there are no major European leaders engaged in the talks. They've been totally marginalized. And of course, and even I'd go further, humiliated. This was the case reflected in US documents which have just come out, the National Security Strategy of December last year, 2025, which basically talked about civilizational erasure in Europe. It's no longer central in that Trumpian global perspective. The National Defense Strategy also basically said Europe has to do more to defend itself, but they accepted. It will actually have to come at the trade-off in cutting welfare, cutting infrastructure development, cutting all the rest at the time of major crisis in Europe itself. So it's a very gloomy future, I think, for most of Western Europe.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. It's going to be an interesting lesson in 200 years' time in history, and they'll be shaking their heads, I would imagine, thinking, how the hell did they get there? I just want to know your thoughts about when the war is over, which parts of the Ukraine do you think that Russia won't have their hands on? There'll be some parts that will be out of Russian control.
Yeah. So one of the key war aims from the beginning has been a very ambitious one. You could call it maximalist, which has been a type of, well, it's not so much even regime change, but for Ukraine to go back to what it said it would do in its declaration of state sovereignty in 1990, and what it also said in the Declaration of Independence in August uh, 1991, and so on, basically to become a neutral state, to become, well, militarized is another issue, but basically not a member of NATO, not a member, if not a member of NATO, but no NATO in Ukraine itself. So what happens to the rump Ukraine, the non-Moscow dominated? It's a fundamental question. Now, what it what I would like to see is that it emerges purged, if I can use that word, of its extreme ethno-nationalist wing. Of course, they don't win. There's ultra-rightists, the semi-fascist element, which has dominated for so long because since 2014, they've had the coercive power. Zelensky, the president today, he was elected in 2019 as the peace candidate, as a Russian speaker. And he said he would do anything for peace. Within months, he was humiliated and marginalized and forced to change his tune by this huge constituency. That will have to go so that we can allow the voice of what I call the other Ukraine. This is the one that calls for a pluralistic, multi-confessional, what we said earlier, multilingual. And I'd like to see a thriving, prosperous, because basically the Ukrainian people twice voted for peace in May 2014, just after the Maidan, and again in April 2019. The people, until then, of course, they're angry now after 4 years of catastrophic war, where at least, I think, 1 million men have died. I mean, millions are scattered to the four winds. We have to reconstitute, and that would take a change not just in the thinking of Kiev, but also in the thinking of Brussels. And unfortunately, there is no sign of that. The peace deal on the table at the moment is a state of permanent hostility. That means it's an armistice and not a peace. And you're going back to your earlier great question, when will Ukraine throw in the towel? Well, they're very stubborn people. Some people would say that stubbornness, which is, of course, laudable in certain circumstances, has now moved to the point of stupidity. Opinion is shifting within Ukraine, accepting that a bad deal is better than a no deal. But as I say, it has to be accompanied. I mean, it's extraordinary the way that Brussels and Western commentators argue that Russia wants to subjugate Ukraine. It is no subjugation to have a peaceful, neutral, non-aligned, thriving, democratic Ukraine. Russia is not afraid of democracy. There's plenty of democracy as well. I'm thinking of Georgia, Armenia, others on its border. It's not democracy the issue, which a lot of the Western framers would say this is imperial ambitions. No, this war is about security, and it will only end when we have a secure Europe, secure Ukraine, and a secure Russia.
This is just a sidebar here. Just imagine you were the editor for the Times and Ukraine surrendered. How do you think the Western media will report this? I'm sure not truthfully.
No, one has to say that I'm often asked, how can we explain the intense Russophobia in the United Kingdom? That it's virulent, and then of course you could talk historically, going back to the Crimean War. Even though we were allies in the Second World War already by May 1945, Churchill was talking about Operation Unthinkable, various military interventions. So basically, there's but this is one reason of the cause of the war. After the end of the Cold War in 1989-91, as this marvelous American diplomat puts it, there was no place for Russia. It wanted to join this collective West. It even asked to join NATO, or some sort of framework of security framework with the Western powers, with Atlantic powers. And so the Times, in other words, will give no quarter. That's the terrible thing. And that's, in other words, it's you could say it's almost pathological Russophobia, which means that I used to go before the war, to talk to British policymakers, and I would ask this question in the FCO, as it was then, Ministry of Defence. What do you think Russia's legitimate security interests are? And I would never get a straight answer, implying, of course, they didn't have any, except simply to humble down, accept Western hegemony, Western dominance. Russia was willing to accept Western leadership, but not dominance, just like China today and many other countries, the middle powers, as Mark Carney would talk about them. No one is going to accept that today because we live in, with a Charter United Nations international system where we have sovereign states, but we need to build a framework building on the principles of the UN Charter based on comity, powers great and middle and small working together for the public good. Now, we're a long way from that, but I'm trying to educate the Times of London and the Telegraph and so on in that tone, because we really need a huge, if you like, a philosophical leap, change of thinking, especially given so many global challenges which we have today.
How long do you think Zelensky's got? I've got no idea. He could hang around for a while. He could disappear very quickly. Do you think they'll ask for their money back? Because I'm sure he's got some savings put away.
Oh, he's got big savings going on. I mean, the Panama Papers showed, we don't know exactly, but certain apartments, flats abroad. But Zelensky himself, of course, is facing the biggest political challenge. Political life in Ukraine, which was frozen, well, for even before the war, since 2021 at least, or even 2020, is coming back to life. Parliament is now becoming far more active. Even Yulia Tymoshenko, the head of the Fatherland Party, is now back on the scene. And as we saw, the corruption scandal just a few weeks ago, which forced him to lose his chief of staff, Andrei Yermak, and he's put the head of the military intelligence, Budanov, in charge of that to shore up his position. But Budanov is considered very closely integrated with the US security apparatus. So at the moment, Zelensky is continuing, but it's clear that Trump has shown his dissatisfaction several times by not just going back to that famous meeting in the White House, that Zelensky's stubbornness. But of course, if Zelensky was to make concessions, he would be swept out of power by his own, the militant nationalists, which I mentioned before. So he's in an impossible position. Clearly, that we're looking for a new type of leader who could genuinely make concessions. But if you give up land for peace, and more, by the way, there's huge opposition to that within Ukraine, but public opinion is shifting that way. But the nationalist formations, so famously the Azov, which is part of the army and part of the National Guard as well, they've warned it. As I said earlier, they'd hang him in the Khreshchatyk, which is the main road in Kiev.
Yeah, we have a dear friend of ours. He's still with us, but he's not working with us anymore. George Eliasson used to have some horrendous stories about Azov, and he's a very lucky man to be still alive. I just want to know who's waiting in the wings to take Zelensky's, and who will they vote for? Is anybody worth the pinch of salt at the moment?
No, the second point, no. But those waiting in the wings are those who can do a deal. So we've got, of course, Zaluzhny, who used to be head of the army. He's now the Ukrainian ambassador in London. And of course, Budanov himself is a potential candidate who is, as I say now, the chief of staff to President Zelensky. So there may be a type of palace coup, and there's much talk of that, again, with the support of a revived parliamentary opposition and political debate. There's, of course, a few people in exile. Alexei Arestovich, who used to be a very close advisor, he certainly would like to throw his hat in the ring. But whether, and this is the problem, has been for Ukrainian polity since independence in 1991, that there are these divisions. But these divisions, until the war, and to this day, are divisions within a vision of a Ukrainian statehood. So no one is talking that should be, in other words, subsumed under Russia and so on. So Western alarmism, Russia doesn't want the responsibility, of course, to govern the non-occupied part. And so there's a whole net, or if you like, a net of complexities here. So, but Zelensky himself, including that extraordinarily bizarre speech he gave at the Davos meeting in January, just a week ago, in which he excoriated the Europeans for not providing enough support, money, military arms, and so on, which, of course, was trying to please the Trumpians. But it was a bizarre speech, and one has to say that Zelensky, in my view, has been out of his depth since the beginning. He's been one of the most catastrophic leaders in world history. If you define a good leader as one which averts and secures the state, prevents a catastrophe, makes the people live more prosperous and happily, well, on all counts, he has failed in the most spectacular manner. He will go down in history as a comedian who should never have been elected president, and he failed to stand up for his own views, which was this multi-confessional, multilingual, tolerant, democratic, prosperous Ukraine, which you all love to see. I want, out of this debris, we want to see that for the great Ukrainian people to be able to live in dignity, honesty, and in peace with all their neighbors, including Russia. I mean, can I just say one thing? I mean, that hate speech, which used to come out for so long out of Galicia, Lvov, and so on, not by all. There were so many notable good people coming out from Western Ukraine. But the dominant feature was this extraordinary viciousness, virulence, Muscali na Vislach to the gallows. I heard this 10, 20, 30 years ago. I said, guys, this is going to lead to the disaster, to your state failure. But of course, that tone after the Maidan of 2014, that became dominant. And it's, of course, this doesn't justify the war. I'm a peacenik. I find you just keep talking until absolutely you try to find a peaceful way out of all of this. But we are where we are. And we're still, this is why I really find it's unforgivable for the Macrons, the Merzes, the Starmers, the Kallases in Europe, still war talk, but they should accompany that by a bit more peace talk.
I'm just thinking, do you think the people that put Zelensky in power, the oligarchs that decided he would be a great leader, do you think they'll be asking for their money back? And normally you say, go back to your other job. Zelensky was a terrible comedian too. So at least he's a terrible politician, terrible leader, and terrible comedian. Can you tell me your thoughts on, because Europe's such a stable bunch of men and women. I mean, they're just fantastic. What about future Russian relations with Europe? How do you see that? And also future US relations. How do you see that too?
Well, starting at the top, I mean, I've always argued, I would just say this very briefly, there's at least 4 levels to this conflict. Fortunately, the US-Russian, the great power, as we used to call it, the superpower relationship, is getting onto some sort of new stage. It's very bumpy because, Trumpian foreign policy has its own peculiarities. The second level is this Russian-European level, which it really has to be what, for me, as a committed European in the, not this existing European Union, but one who believes that the United Kingdom and that Western Europe has to really live this peace project, which we were talking about after 45 and the establishment of the European Union. But at the moment, it's turned, and the only language is this: the whole continent, western part of the continent, is seized by war fever. You may have seen just yesterday, the head of the German Reserve and Armed Forces was talking about 65,000 men, complete Cold War mobilization, strengthening bridges, having medical facilities for fatalities and injuries, not just 1,000 in a year, but 1,000 a day. We're talking war. It's unbelievable. So, and as I say, more sanctions and the attempt of this dreadful Ursula von der Leyen Commission to not just stop Russian energy coming to Europe now, but in perpetuity. So the two halves of the continent, and of course, there's the equivalents on the Russian side who say that basically Russia's European journey for the last 500 years is over. They now have to build a stable North Eurasian community in partnership with its, Central Asia, partnership with China, with India, and so on. So we're witnessing the emergence of a post-Western world, which from the Russian perspective doesn't necessarily mean it's post-American as well, but not anti-American, but it's certainly anti-European. And of course, in the other level, there has to be, in my view, bridge building between the Russian and Ukrainian communities. Because one of the reasons for this war is that they're so close, so much intermarriage. They're Eastern Slavic, they're Eastern, Orthodox in religion mostly, even though bitter divisions even there. So there has to be, and so in other words, the foundation for any durable peace is a new type of Ukraine to emerge, a pluralistic, tolerant, multi-confessional one, and on that basis we can build out for a stronger peace project. But of course, that's all idealistic. At the moment, we're going the other way. The language of hatred and violence and war has seized the continent, which is, even though there's maybe little glimmers, as I said, even Macron. But the thing with Macron, the president of France, is that what he says in the morning can be very different from what he says in the afternoon. And by tea time, even after tea, he's saying something totally different. So he's, I remember talking, if I may say so, with the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov of one of his early initiatives way back even in 2019, when he said there can be no peace in Europe against Russia. It has to be with Russia. So I said this to Lavrov, and he says, look, you just can't trust him. And most European leaders, Western leaders, what they say today, they completely repudiate tomorrow. And that, of course, goes for the US leadership over the years.
And you look at Trump. I mean, again, he's a bit like Macron. He'll change his mind 3 times in that day. But maybe someone could suggest that his extraction in Venezuela, he could probably do the same in Ukraine too.
Yeah, that's what some people say about Budanov being appointed there, that in other words, that there may be a swift move. And of course, the analogy we make there is with South Vietnam, with Diem in 1964, which then led to a succession of weak Vietnamese leaders. It didn't save the situation, but the CIA coup there was an attempt to believing that change of leader. It is part of the puzzle, but it'll need far more than just simply a change of leader.
Brilliant conversation. I appreciate your time. I'll let you get up early because you're in the UK at the moment, and it's still early. It's almost 9, so it's good to hear, good to see. Richard, Professor Emeritus Richard Sakwa, if somebody wants to find out more about you, more of your, and we mentioned your books, and we'll put that up on the a bit later on, so they can go purchase your book and read some great words. But if they wanted to follow you on socials, do you have any socials at the moment?
Yeah, that's again, I don't. The reason is that once I started, my first book on Ukraine came out just after the Maidan, and they were told it was vicious. I mean, it really was. There's a special unit in the Ukrainian presidential administration designed to intimidate Western academics and independent thinking. So they pile in. For example, a great person who I have enormous respect, Lord Robert Skidelsky. We've written letters in the tone of peace and so on in The Guardian and other newspaper, Financial Times. We, 7 of us, call for peace. Then we have 71, 81 others counter-mobilize against us. Anyway, so no, but the University of Kent website has got a lot of my, if you can go through the Department of Politics, they will see, some publications and works there.
Richard Sakwa, it's been a pleasure, and I would like to do this more often. We have some extraordinary guests on, and you're one of those. And again, appreciate your time. This is The World Today. Coming up next, we'll talk to Greg Simons from Bangladesh in Dhaka.
With your help, we can continue to fight for freedom, reach new audiences, and bring important information to the public free of charge. This is not possible without your generosity. Join our quest for the truth and our freedom and donate today, telling it as it is. This is today's News Talk, The World Today.
Makers are facing more travel.
When we're on the go, it's easy to go into our own world. Keep your mind on the road.
Our beautiful world is changing, withering, dying by the hands of those who don't value nature, even though we all depend on it for life itself. But there is hope. Together with caring friends, the Nature Conservancy can restore our lands, heal our waters, and save our wildlife with big solutions only nature can provide. But every day we lose more of the places we love, and we urgently need to save endangered lands, waters, and wild species. The actions we take today will determine the tomorrow we leave to our children and grandchildren. The water they drink, the air they breathe, the beauty they experience. To learn more about how you can help protect and conserve our beautiful world, visit nature.org today.
Asthma is a growing problem, especially among children. Asthma affects the quality of life for millions like me every single day. My name is Chris Draft, and I have asthma. And I've spent more than a decade in the NFL tackling asthma on and off the field. Join me in the EPA in helping people control their asthma. Asthma is a lung condition that can be controlled through medication and by avoiding things that can make it worse. 3 steps are the solution to controlling asthma. Step 1, talk to a doctor. Step 2, make a plan. And step 3, get rid of things that can make it worse. Asthma can be tackled. For more information on asthma, log on to epa.gov/asthma.
We're today's News Talk, The World Today.
Welcome back to the World Today. Mike Ryan here. Nice to have your company. It's 9:15 in the UK right now, 7:15 in Queensland. 100 years behind still, and I don't know what time it is in Dakar. It's also 8:45 in Sydney and Melbourne. Professor Greg Simons is a geopolitical commentator and a professor based at the Department of Journalism, Media and Communication at Daffodil International University in Bangladesh. He also has expertise on Russian mass media, terrorism, public diplomacy, the relationship between politics, information and armed conflict. He is currently working on the role of information and communication in contemporary geopolitics at that particular university. We're going to talk to Greg today about the recent developments in Syria, the fate of the Kurds and other groups, as well as the stratospheric rise of Syrian President Giuliani, or al-Giuliani, who's meeting this week with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Greg, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, cheers, Mike.
What's your thoughts on Giuliani meeting with Putin?
Well, I mean, Giuliani's doing a bit of hedging because he knows that the relations can change with the US on a drop of a hat, because if he remembers the US relations with other terrorists, well, one in particular comes to mind. Osama bin Laden was useful in Afghanistan, but became a liability later on. So I dare say he is just covering his bases.
And I would imagine that Trump, he probably wouldn't be too adverse to a conversation between Giuliani and Putin. I mean, Putin isn't the arch enemy that Trump would. I mean, I know you're not a favourite of Trump, but they do have a relationship. I wonder how much Putin would trust him, since a certain number of drones tried to take him out. He decided to move, where he was suggested to stay at a particular place. He didn't trust it, and that's where he was going to have the meeting via communications with Trump. about peace and stuff. Anyway, they blew the place up, but he had moved, so nothing lost there. So I'd imagine that the trust that that Putin would have for Trump, and vice versa, also the trust that Trump would have for Putin. But there is a relationship there. So I can't really see at this stage enough of a concern that Giuliani is meeting with Putin.
Well, I mean, for Giuliani, this is a matter of survival because he knows US proxies and clients have a short life. I mean, you were talking with Richard Sakwa earlier and mentioned President Diem of South Vietnam, who was brought to power by a CIA-backed coup. But what everyone in the global south knows, he is also taken out by a CIA-backed coup some years later when he became a liability. So, I mean, history, if you know it, provides plenty of examples just how reliable the US is as a partner. I mean, the Kurds know this very well by now too, or they should do.
There's been some serious violence in Syria. Which groups are involved at the moment?
Oh, there's lots of different factions. I mean, because the Kurds, for example, have seemed to be more or less abandoned because this is the fate of most US proxies. I mean, they've been abandoned in Iraq and now they're abandoned in Syria. So there's a long history of it. But you've got al-Jilani, of course, who was not only al-Baghdadi's number two from ISIS, but also the founder of al-Qaeda in Syria, which kept on getting rebranded, who was leading a crusade, if we want to call it this way, against all groups that oppose or are seen as heretical to this, should we say, I don't know what teaching which they go by. This includes the Christian groups, the Alawites, but interestingly, although Trump is bombing Nigeria because of its alleged persecution of Christians, he does not do the same to al-Jilani for this reason. So, yeah, I mean, Syria is a very ethnically and religiously diverse country, which makes it very vulnerable to fracturing. And the US loves to fracture and wedge a country in order to weaken it, turn each side against the other.
What about ISIS? Are they back in business? And if they are, who are they murdering this time?
Well, I mean, ISIS are back in business. If you look at al-Jilani's former, should we say, affiliation, I mean, he's very much part of it. So, and you can see those bearded Democrats which are going around slaughtering different ethnic groups, including Alawites, Christians, and so forth, and those who do not align with this this rather extreme interpretation of Islam. Well, I mean, they're absolutely in business, and I don't think they've ever really been out of business. This was threatened with, for example, the entry at the invitation of the former President Bashar al-Assad to fight these terrorist groups. Iran and Russia were instrumental in weakening them, which is why you have something like ISIS-K, which which doesn't attack US, doesn't attack Israel, and nominates its enemies as being Iran, Russia, and China, the three main geopolitical opponents of the US, very conveniently.
What about the Kurds? Are they feeling a bit miserable at the moment? Have the US abandoned the Kurds?
Yeah, I mean, the Kurds were useful for a while it lasted, but Kurds do not look at history very well. I mean, we look at what happened to them when they were used against Saddam Hussein. They were repeatedly abandoned there when it became inconvenient. So, I mean, there's consistency in this, a useful proxy. But of course, I mean, it's also a very problematic proxy because they're in conflict with this terrorist in charge, al-Jilani, but also they are rubbing Turkish security up the wrong way too, because Kurds, PKK and so forth are seen as a significant security threat. And one of the big points of contention between US and Turkey, especially since the 2003 Iraq war, when the US started using Kurds again and making this Turkish area on the Turkish border. So history repeats itself.
Yeah, we see President Trump. You would never have thought he would know so much about the Middle East. He's just amazing, isn't he? And it must make you feel warm and fuzzy within. I know it doesn't.
Oh, he's an intellectual giant. He proves it every time with caps lock in the middle of the night on Truth Social.
That's fantastic. The world is a much safer place not. Tell me, Syria, is it more unstable now that we no longer have Assad? Is it out of control? And don't forget, Giuliani was he's a very good-looking leader, according to your hero, President.
Yeah, I mean, we know what a fine and excellent judge of character Donald J. Trump is, and I mean, this absolutely cements it. It's nothing like a pair of scissors and a comb won't do to brush up a hardened jihadist to make him, put him in a suit and make him look fantastic. But yeah, Syria is a basket case. I mean, also an interesting thing about al-Jilani, I mean, his conversation with Netanyahu in Hebrew. I mean, nothing speaks more of a devoted jihadist than speaking Hebrew to the head of the political leader of Israel. And the fact that he does not contest the Israeli incrementally advancing occupation and annexation of Syrian territory. So, and now you've got the issue, Turks aren't happy about this. And you have just internal chaos and turmoil, which is just, it's not going to end. I think it's only going to increase, especially with time. And al-Jilani may well find himself in the Osama bin Laden scenario where he becomes embittered or a liability, and he might be given some more democracy by the US.
What about the grand plan for Syria, including the US position, Russia position, Turkey and Israel?
I think the US has no grand plan. As long as al-Jilani is a good terrorist and does what Washington says, then he'll be left alone. As far as
he's good looking.
Oh yes. I mean, he shapes up well on camera with a bit of grooming and dress management.
Big, beautiful. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, we'll just wait for some of those fawning posts on Truth Social from Trump with some huggy bromance moments. Yeah.
Diplomacy at its best. That's all I can say.
As far as Israel is concerned, Israel is happy that Syria is a basket case because Syria was one of those pivotal countries in the Arab-Israeli wars but also an ally with Iran. So in this case, Israel's happy. Turkey, they're concerned about the Kurdish issue, and of course they tend to be quite opportunistic when things like this happen. And now that the Kurds seem to no longer have protection of what Rutte called Daddy, so Daddy Trump is no longer supporting the Kurds, they see opportunity to take issue with what they see as a Kurdish problem.
Yeah, it's far too complex for, I was going to say, for my simple mind, but what I was going to say, it's far too complex, I think, for Donald Trump's, as some would say, simple mind. But again, you are one, and I apologise because you are one of his greatest fans.
Well, he declared himself a stable genius, a very stable genius in the Trump 1.0, so I think it's quite a bit of harsh and unwarranted character assassination by you. You should hang your head.
Slap me down. And I apologise. I'll be in the naughty corner if you were my lecturer. Get out of that corner now. How dare you say terrible things. Just quickly, for about 15 seconds, your thoughts on Iran and the Armada sailing towards it.
Well, I mean, this gives me a kind of feeling of deja vu, because we remember in 1941 when the British sent their Armada, Prince of Wales and Repulse, to scare the Japanese, and how that ended. It ended with a disaster, and the Japanese didn't have hypersonic missiles and the support of China and Russia, which Iran in its current shape and form does. So you've got a lot of bluff and bluster by Trump at the moment. But if he sees this is going to be personal public humiliation for him, he'll back down. If he feels, well, if you feed a narcissist with megalomania a victory, it's a rather hollow one, like Venezuela and like Greenland, then he might be stupid enough to try it. And then we have the second Prince of Wales and Repulse moment, because there'll be a sitting duck there. This gunboat diplomacy will not work, especially when the Iranian people back the Iranian government, even if they have issues with the Iranian government.
That's always a problem. We're going to rescue you. No, we don't want to be rescued. To go back. Dr. Greg Simons, thank you very much for your time. If somebody wants to find out more about what you do, I'm sure Donald Trump does, tell us how they can do that.
Well, look for the most politically incorrect spaces on digital space. I can be found on Russiagate, which I think is one of my most active ones, or Academia EDU. There are different politically incorrect videos of me on YouTube with different ones from TRT World and other ones, which if you
I know it's terrible.
Type, yes. So you're anywhere there's political incorrectness, I can be kind of found.
And here often. And we love it too.
Yes.
And I get into trouble because you bring out the naughty boy in me. So I do get into trouble in a production meeting after this. So thank you for doing that to me.
My pleasure. Always glad to be of assistance.
Okay. This has been the World Today. Dr. Greg Simons with his words of wisdom. Great to have your company. Back again, same time tomorrow, along with the protagonists. Have a great day, great night. If you're in Australia, if you're in New Zealand, it's almost time for bed. Thank you very much. Again, this is The World Today.